You're very welcome along to the 2023 Matchbook NFL Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, Matchbook's Daniel Hussey, and delighted to welcome Drew Dinsick back to the podcast, but also a brand new lineup with Sam Farley and Judah. That's at Throw the Damn Ball on Twitter. So, Drew, firstly, you excited for the football season, yeah?
Oh, yeah. This is the best time of year. The schedule makers did us a solid. The week one slate looks incredibly fun. I think that comes with a consequence, though, because weeks 2, 3, and maybe even week 4 don't have a ton of marquee games that are really going to kind of move the needle. There's a little bit of a coolness in just my expectation of offenses this season. We've had a ton of moving parts in terms of offensive coordinators, new schemes, young quarterbacks. My just general sense is that we're going to have a little bit of a build into the season. The way the schedule makers stack things, there's like kind of an incredible round robin of all of the best teams right at the very tail end of the season. Like, so from Thanksgiving, through Christmas, we basically get to see every team with realistic championship, pedigree and potential all play each other. That'll sort out seeding pretty significantly, and I think really kind of set the tone for anybody who's playing the Super Bowl future market. But it's always fun this time of year when we have everybody's relatively healthy except for the Chiefs, and that adds a little bit of spice to the season.
Absolutely. The Kelsey news from yesterday, everyone looking up bruised bone and how long that can take average. Everyone's an expert on Twitter, of course. You may know this, Rob Pizzola, and unfortunately he's moved on to the Hammer betting, his own company. We wish him the very best of luck with that. Suma tied up there too, but he'll be writing on Insight. So delighted, and a lot of the UK audience will be aware of Sam Farley here. But Sam, welcome to the Matchbook NFL Podcast. It's your debut, so there's absolutely no pressure whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Big debut, big boots to fill, but I'm on with a great team here. And I mean, like you said, Drew, this season, I mean, it always excites us beforehand, doesn't it? But right now, I feel like there's so much potential. It's limitless. And every single one of my sleeper picks in fantasy is still possible that they have a great season. So I'm happy. I'm excited. And yeah, it's an honor to be here with you guys.
Yeah, we're all correct at the moment as before a single ball is being thrown. And Judah, that's at Throw the Damn Ball. And that's DAMBALL on Twitter. Well worth checking out his tweets. Judah, give the listeners a little introduction to yourself and how excited are you for the new NFL?
Yeah, I'm absolutely stoked for the season. I walked out of my apartment last week and it was a brisk 58 degrees. I smelled fall. I smelled football. I feel like, during the off season, there's kind of a little bit of pressure to prep for the season. And there's a lot of stress involved there. And then just once you get that first sniff of football, it all just turns to excitement. A little bit of background for myself. I work for Pro Football Focus, a data analytics company, doing a bunch of betting and other sorts of research on different components of play. Done a bunch of research into coverage, man versus zone stuff. A lot of research into quarterbacks, which I'm sure will guide a lot of my analysis. And I always have an eye towards how can this sort of research help me with my bets. As all of you said, it's week 1. I haven't yet been proven wrong. All of my theses are true, which makes it a particularly fun way to get started.
Yeah, I think I'm 0-1 already on the season now. I put I think one of my first bets was Sam Darnold comeback player of the year because I just didn't believe Brock Purdy was going to be healthy week 1. That I'm going to go ahead and grade that one a loss. I don't think that prediction's going to come through. Brock Purdy probably going to start all 17 games. But otherwise, unblemished record.
Yeah, Drew 0-1, but the rest of the guys and the rest of you listeners are still in play here at 500, looking ahead to the new season. So before we get going into the Super Bowl outrights, which I'm super, super excited about, if you are new to the Matchbook NFL Podcast, head over to our YouTube channel, subscribe completely for free. You'll see lots of clips for the podcast. All we ask is you hit that like button, and a special competition for week 1, £50 free bet. All you have to do is comment on the YouTube video, any of our YouTube week 1 videos, your winner of the Super Bowl. That's very simple. Who's going to win Super Bowl 2024? Check out the comments on YouTube. That's the best place to do it. We'll get into the Super Bowl outright, and there are some fascinating picks from the guys already, so I won't give too much away, but look at the top of the betting here on matchbook.com. Kansas City Chiefs, 7.6. The Eagles, 9.0. 49ers are 9.8. The Buffalo Bills, Biggest price there at 11.0. The Bengals 11.5. Cowboys 15.5. Jets under Aaron Rodgers 19.0. Ravens 22.0. My beloved Chargers to 24.0. The Dolphins 27.0. And it's 30.0. Jags, Lions, and 44 bigger prices. The rest. Drew, I'll start with you on this one because you are looking at the Bills, but just on an overall pick at those markets and those prices, do those top four look about right to you in the betting so far?
So again, if you're playing this market realistically, you're building out a portfolio of, best price available on every team that has a realistic chance. You're trying, I don't think anyone's really using this particular market and this exchange to just, I think this team's going to be good this year, so let's bet them. And so I think you kind of have to think, what is my strategy this year? And, as I kind of laid out off the top, I see most of the kind of seeding is going to be sorted out in the November, December timeframe, which means a lot of like who ultimately is going to win the AFC and NFC is going to come down to injury luck. It's going to come down to, just sort of how teams are gelling, roles, responsibilities are getting, distributed. And I think, you're going to have to slow play, particularly the AFC side of this market outside of two teams. For me, at least the AFC winner comes down almost certainly, or at least the AFC value comes down to who will get the 1 seed in this conference. It is no secret that 8 of the best 10 quarterbacks play in the AFC, something like 5 of the top 8 power ranked teams play in the AFC, so it's just a top heavy, or it's an imbalanced conference, I suppose, which means that whoever's coming in as like the 7 seed is probably going to be live. And that 2-7 matchup is going to be really, really competitive. The 3-6 will be competitive. 4-5 will be competitive. You have teams like the Chargers, who I think are excellent, but have no home field advantage. So you basically have a flat earth sort of situation going on at the top of the AFC, in my opinion, which sets up an opportunity for whoever gets the 1 seed is going to be basically in cruise control of their own destiny, not just because they're going to avoid playing a very, very, very tough team in the wild card round, but they then have home field advantage, presumably, in that divisional and the AFC championship game. So name of the game for me in the futures market, particularly on the AFC side, is to try to corner prices of teams that I think have a realistic shot to get the 1 seed and that are a little bit long. Currently, I think that you're going to see shortening between the 2 teams at the top and the Chiefs and the Bills. Right now, we said 7 and 11 are currently available on the market. I think the 11 for the Bills gets quite a lot shorter, not just because of the issues the Chiefs are dealing with personnel availability and injury, but the Bills have a very easy schedule to start out the season, which is crazy considering they're in a very, they have an overall a very difficult schedule, in my opinion. So I think the defense is being slightly underrated for the Bills. The offense, of course, will be just as good, if not better than last year, with some more, multiplicity, some more looks. And I think that generally the market will warm up to, this team was power rated above the Chiefs for most of the last season. And if you see that, particularly with a couple of their early primetime games, I would expect that number gets quite a lot shorter. So I think 11 for the Bills in pocket is a pretty important bet if you're going to fill out a portfolio. I don't think you'll see that again for the rest of the season. And then the long shot that I would kind of look for, who I think has a realistic shot to get the 1 seed in the AFC, is the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think in the 32 range, that's a play just because their division is so much weaker. I personally think they get 6 wins against the likes of the Titans, Texans, and Colts. And at that point, they have some pretty favorable situational matchups against the Chiefs, when the Chiefs will be less than full strength potentially, and against the Bills, when the Bills will have given up a home game in Buffalo to go to London to play the Jaguars. So for those of the listeners who are in the UK, that's kind of a fun one, where the Jaguars get to stay in London after their Atlanta Falcons matchup and be kind of fully adjusted to the time and the situation. A little mini camp actually as they prep for that Bills game. So Jags, I think, are live to get the 1 seed, which I think opens up the door for them to ultimately make the Super Bowl and shock the world. So those are the 2 that I really think have a decent chance to shorten between now and when we get to, say, Thanksgiving.
Okay, Bills 11.0, Jags 32.0. Fascinating stuff in the schedule there as well. Drew is the schedules man, so do keep an eye on his Twitter there throughout. But yeah, very interesting on the Jags. Over to you, Sam, on this. Look, you do like the Chiefs. You still think they're rated probably the best team in football, but you want to leave them alone at 7.6. Not too dissimilar to what Drew was saying. So where are you sort of looking for value in this Super Bowl outright to build up your portfolio?
Yeah, so for me, there's two teams that kind of really leap out. Let's firstly go for the Chargers, because I think you're getting a really big price. I think it's 24, isn't it? And that's a bigger price than the likes of the Ravens and the Jets. And look, I know there's obviously the Chiefs to contend with, but do we really think that they're not better than the Jets? Like I just can't see it. For me, Justin Herbert, it's going into year 4 now, is it? He's been so good. I think we've almost forgot after last season was a bit disappointing, just how talented the guy is. Shattering records left, right, and center. And I think ultimately there's two things. Well, there's more than two things, but there are two things that I think are integral to any team that's going to have a good Super Bowl run. That is a quarterback, and Justin Herbert. We might not have seen some playoff magic from him just yet, but it'll come. And we've seen enough from him in the regular season just to know that he is a top quarterback in this league. And the other thing that I think really can't be understated is the offensive line. And the Chargers have an offensive line that I think can put them up against anybody. And ultimately, if you've got a guy as talented as Herbert behind an offensive line as strong as that, then there is a real chance for them. And those odds, I absolutely love it. Obviously, we actually have a capable OC this year as well in Kellen Moore. So that's a huge plus. We've seen what he's done already in his career. Add in the fact, not only do they have Mike Williams, they've got Keenan Allen. They now have QJ has come in via the NFL draft this season. So that's another weapon they've got. Eckler is still there. I love the weapons. I love the offensive line. I love the OC. I absolutely adore the quarterback. And I think they've got a strong defense as well. This is a team I think can win in multiple different ways. And yeah, I'm all in on them. And I know every year I think people talk themselves into the Chargers and then it goes wrong. But this year, this is the year, guys. This is the year it's going to finally work out. And at that price, I absolutely love them. And for a little bit of a long one, and this is far more of a dart throw, far more speculative, but it's the Packers. And I'm not a Packers fan, and I really wasn't an Aaron Rodgers fan either. So it pains me to say this, but I think they're going to be quite good. And currently a massive price, I think it's 90. If they start well, that will crash. And everything I've heard about Jordan Love throughout this training camp and as we've got close to the season is just so good. And by all means, we know that people pump the wheels on their players. That happens. It's a new quarterback effectively, even though he's not a rookie. It's only natural that his teammates are going to be out there telling us how he's great, how he's going to win them loads of games. That's entirely normal. But we've seen, was it the Bengals? Who else did they play in preseason? Every team they played, basically, the opposition have come out of those joint scrimmages and just said, this guy's pretty good, you know. And if the opposition are saying that, they have no reason to say that. They have no investment in him whatsoever. That tells me there's a bit of a player there. And I'm not expecting them to be the best team in the NFL. They won't even be the best team in the conference. But at 90, I think that odds is just so big. I think I have to just have a little sprinkle on them, see how it progresses in that first couple of weeks, first month. And I think maybe there's an opportunity to lay a bit further down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of back to lay options. Even the Chargers, I know Drew touched on home field advantage, maybe come the playoffs, that could be vitally important. But those couple of teams there, perhaps Matchbook Bet Exchange, you can lay off some of your stake for a profit after a couple of weeks if, for example, the Packers are half the price. Judah, over to you, Anna. This is as fun as it gets. This team is out currently 210.0 on the Matchbook Bet Exchange. So make the case for the Washington Commanders.
Yeah. Well, first I was going to say the way I'm just looking at the current landscape of the AFC, and almost to Drew's point, I feel like I could make the case that any one of like 7 teams can be the number 1 seed. And it's almost like that's a spot I'd rather pick during the season because I could really see realistic cases for any of like the Jaguars, the Browns, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Chargers, even the Ravens, the Dolphins. All these teams I think have realistic shots in that, and I certainly wouldn't fault anyone for putting a flyer there. But that kind of, because of how crowded that landscape is, I'm trying to take my shots a bit in the NFC. And yes, I'm going deep out here with the Commanders. But I don't think this is just kind of like a dart throw. I see a little value and like maybe it's a couple percentage points. I think there is an actual realistic chance that we're having this conversation in December, and Washington's like a full-on playoff team. I've built a metric which essentially captures how well a team can move the ball on offense and prevent teams from moving the ball. So it kind of like cuts through a little bit of the noise of turnovers. And the Commanders were actually the third best defense last year. This is a team that did not have a lot of turnover luck. And defenses do tend to regress year to year. But I'd be a little less concerned about the Commanders regressing just because of the depth they have, right? Defense is a weak link system. So if a couple of guys go down, that can really leave holes in your defense for offenses to attack. But especially the depth on the defensive line for the Commanders, I think, which is the strength of this defense, makes that a little less likely. Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, all first-round picks, all of whom have lived up. Chase Young, when healthy, all of them have lived up to their first-round pedigrees. I think this could and should be a very, very good defense. Add in a guy in Sam Howell, who I think is now kind of just being assumed as like, he won't be a very good quarterback. I want to take us back to the summer of 2020, where Sam Howell was probably going to be the first overall pick. He was terrific in college that year. That, I think, is the case for the tales of Washington. Is he's a guy who plays like the 2020 Sam Howell, and he was good in college. We didn't get much out of him last year, obviously, so there's an absence of evidence there. But if he is the type of quarterback who was a number one overall pick, at least in some's mind, if we get that guy with a Terry McLaurin, who is everyone's idea of a terrific NFL receiver, and Jahan Dotson, who I think many are kind of plugging as a breakout receiver, and by some of my metrics, he's a guy who ranked in like the 95th percentile in earning separation against single coverage. So if you see one-on-one coverage with Jahan Dotson, there's a very good chance he's gonna come down with the ball. And in the modern NFL, if you've got a quarterback who can make all of the throws, can play to a top 10 level, you've got talented receivers and a solid defense, that's how you win. And yes, there's building a bit of projection, but that's what we have to do at this point in the season. No one really knows how good Sam Howell is going to be, but it's not just a random 7th round pick or a random 3rd round pick who's coming in. This is a guy who at one point in time was projected to be the best quarterback in his class. I don't think it's so far-fetched that he could play at a above average clip, and then add in that defense and those receivers. There's a real case, I think, for the Commanders to have some upside and sneak into the playoffs and maybe even get a Super Bowl berth and win.
Okay, the line is, once you're in the playoffs, anything can happen. That is a fun one to watch, Jude, and you've sold me a little bit on the Commanders at that price. It doesn't take much at 210 currently in the matchup betting exchange. We'll see how long that lasts, but Packers at 90, Chargers at 24 for Sam, and Drew wants 2 on side. The Bills 11.0 on the Jags. Scheduling, perhaps the big call there, 32.0. So fun Super Bowl outright picks. I think, Drew, from memory last year, you had the Eagles last year at a really good price based purely on the schedule to start with, and we saw them get all the way to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that was nice. Actually gave me a good bit of latitude to bet the Chiefs. A little bit carefree when it came to the Super Bowl. I think that was the really fun run for the Eagles last year, and they left some money on the table, I guess, because Coach of the Year didn't get home for Nick Sirianni. He actually finished 5th in voting, which I still cannot wrap my head around. What in the world, people didn't recognize about what a job he did last year, but so be it. No, I think the Eagles, to me at least this year, are a pass in the NFC just because their schedule is so much tougher. They face so many more top tier quarterbacks than they did last year, and combine that with some attrition on the defensive roster, and just in general, just decent chance that the defense was overrated because they were in such positive game states for so much of last season that I think, this Eagles team is going to be, hard pressed to repeat that level of regular season success. And, but that might make for a good opportunity to bet the Eagles at some wild card, in the wild card round and beyond at potentially as road dogs this postseason. So I'm excited about that. But the Commanders shout is a fun one from Judah. I'm excited. Actually, I can already feel a disagreement brewing between us next week as the Commanders head to the Denver Broncos and see what the fair price ought to be in that early season test for Sam Howell at altitude. So that's going to be fun to follow all season long.
That's the marquee game sorted for week 2. We will move on and we will start. So as a touch on their marquee games, we will pick 4 each week. And it so happens this week, there will be the Sky games for those based in the UK. 49ers at Steelers, Dolphins at Chargers, Cowboys at Giants, Bills at Jets. We actually struggled to whittle this down to 4, as Drew touched on. It's a phenomenal week 1, probably one of the best from living memory anyway, over the last few years. But let's get started. 49ers at the Steelers. Let's take a look at the betting that we have a Matchbook betting exchange, which is currently recording this Wednesday afternoon. 49ers are the favorites in the money line, 1.82 to the Steelers, 2.14. The point spread gives the Steelers a 2-point start at 1.92, and the total for this game is 41.0, shaded a little bit towards the over. So, look, Sam, you really wanted to talk about this game. So, look, make the case for the Steelers.
Yeah, so the Steelers, I've gone from being so down on them last season to I'm far too high on them, if I'm honest with you. But I've gone for Steelers +2. I think ultimately they're going to be hugely improved this year. I mean, it can't get much worse than it was at certain points last year, that's for sure. I think Kenny Pickett, he had a really rough season, obviously making his rookie season, but he's had a bit of time off. By all accounts, it seems like he's had a reasonable camp. The offensive line there wasn't amazing last year, but it wasn't quite as bad as I think some have had it advertised as. So I think there's room for growth there. In particular, there's one guy who they drafted this year, Darnell Washington, who I'm absolutely in love with the guy. I think he's going to be a far better real life player than he is fantasy player before anyone rushes to pick him up. But like, this is a guy who's going to be on the field 24/7 for the Steelers. He could push a lorry over. The guy is just pure brawn, just a giant, to be honest with you. Everything I've seen from training camp, little clips of him just on a lev sled. I'm enjoying watching it. Like that is the level of like obsession I've got with this guy. So I think he's going to add a lot to their game. He's just going to be able to create holes. I just really looking forward to seeing him play. Then you have the receiving core. Obviously they've got Allen Robinson. He's arrived now. I don't think that's really going to push the needle a huge amount, but George Pickens, he could really take a leap this year. He's got the skill set to be one of the best in the league. We saw some circus catches last year effectively, and there's such potential there. I think he's one of these guys that could go either way on him, but I'm quite confident that he's going to have a good season. And then you have Deontay Johnson, who, I mean, when you look at his stats last year, if there is a player in the entire league who's primed for positive regression, it is Deontay Johnson, I think. So ultimately, the Steelers, I think, are a team that are potentially look a bit underrated coming into this season. Great coaching, some talent on the roster, incredible defense. I don't think we need to talk about that too much, but that's obviously one of their strong suits against a 49ers team that I felt this way about the 49ers for a while. There's times where I just don't trust them. And right now, I don't totally trust them. I need to see them for a few games before I really buy into them. Brock Purdy, I'm still, I know Drew mentioned him at the start of the show. I'm still not totally sold on him. I'm really not. I think there's a good chance we see Sam Darnold as a starter before the end of the year, if I'm honest with you. That's one of my hot takes for the season. But yeah, I just think the Steelers, they're a bit underrated, and I think these odds are kind of taking into account what we saw last season a lot more than potentially how these teams line up on Sunday. And for me, I'm not convinced this Niners team are as good as the team at the end of last season, at least not in terms of form or anything like that. Whereas I do think the Steelers are going to be improved. So for me, yeah, I'm just taking the Steelers by the points.
Okay, yeah, interesting. And Judah, I'll go to you next on this one because Sam touched on maybe last season's form. And I guess if you were pricing this up towards the end of last season, maybe 4.5, 5 would be the line here. It's interesting you've gone for an alternative handicap, which you can do in Matchbook, and incidentally, it'd be the best place to do those sort of alternative handicaps right up until a few points up, both above and beyond. So currently 49ers -4.5 is around at 2.4. And this is a bet you're going to go with.
Yeah, I think you framed it perfectly. And the reason I'd go for an alternative handicap here is that I'm not so confident in the median, but I think the play is essentially that if we price this game at the end of last year, this is like where the spread would be. And I'd rather kind of take the plus money there on that account. But I'm not understanding two things. Number one, the Brock Purdy hate or like this is a guy who came in, did absolutely nothing but ball. I mean, he hasn't actually lost the game, and obviously quarterback wins are not exactly a thing. But in every metric that you look at for Purdy, he basically was just Jimmy Garoppolo, but had the ability to scramble. And I think with Kyle Shanahan at quarterback, and especially with the weapons and missing George Kittle here would be a bit of a knock here. He doesn't need to do much. All he needs to do is kind of make the reads and get the ball out quickly. And that's exactly what he did. I did some research as like a proxy for quarterback decision making and looking at the percentage of throws that a quarterback throws to an open window where a guy is open versus a tight window where there's tight coverage or some defenders in the area. And Purdy was the very best in the NFL, actually. And most of that is Shanahan getting the guys open, and there aren't lots of tight windows to throw with, but we should expect that to be sticky. There's no reason why, Kyle Shanahan won't do what he's done for the past, 6-7 years in San Francisco. I also, the Steelers defense to me does not look like a positive unit. Sure, they have two good edge rushers and Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt's one of the best defensive players in the NFL, but like they're trotting out Levi Wallace and Patrick Peterson at cornerback. Like these guys have not been good since 2018. Very attackable matchups. And Purdy, I think, if anything, is going to get better, right? We see quarterbacks develop from years 1 to 2. And the areas in which Purdy struggled, which is a bit with not his accuracy, but kind of these turnover-worthy plays or throws that are tons of dropped interceptions, which was certainly true. But quarterbacks tend to get better from year 1 to year 2 in exactly that area. So I think when you look at it, we could have a completely different tier matchup. And I like the Steelers too relative to expectation, but I think there's a lot of projection we need to first see. We have a big sample size of the Niners completely dominating teams, and I think that will continue. One other point I'll make is that the team total here for the Niners is about 21. They scored about 27 points per game last year. So I like to kind of be able to source exactly where my disagreement is here or where I can find some value. And like, this is a team that I think is being priced. Maybe it's the Steelers defense. Maybe it's Brock Purdy. I don't see any of those two as being particularly sticky. I see this as a real chance that like there's a big tier gap still between the Niners and the Steelers. And this line should really be like 4.5.
Okay, yeah, and that 49ers -4.5 for producer Ryan, just to update the price, 2.56, Judah. So we'll give you that at the time of recording. So Drew, it's up to you to be the neutral here, my man.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm noted Steelers lover this preseason, largely just because I think the AFC North is flat, and I just in general like the opportunity for Pickett to take a step forward this year. But this particular matchup to me spells trouble for the Niners in a couple of ways. And in the same sort of sense that, going for prices is kind of trying to capture some of the uncertainty. I think Steelers money line is the play at plus, 2.14 currently. And it comes down to a couple of key things. I'm not expecting Bosa to be available. I don't think that contract situation gets resolved in time for him to be out there on Sunday. And I don't think that George Kittle is going because he's dealing with a groin injury. And by my count, that's two guys that could push over a lorry that will not be on the field for the San Francisco 49ers. In general, the idea that you have a quarterback in Brock Purdy, who I do believe in ultimately being kind of the perfect avatar for Shanahan on the field, and a guy that clearly does exactly what he's asked to do, exactly the way Shanahan wants to do it. And that's like synergy that you can't find anywhere else really across the NFC. I think he will ultimately get to that same level we saw him at in December of last year, but without Kittle, who was a little bit of a safety blanket for him, at least in terms of just kind of different targets, particularly over the middle of the field. I think that matters, and I think in general, Purdy without as much game time, without as much preseason reps as you would have hoped for, is potentially a little bit rusty in this contest, and he's going to be behind an offensive line that has only one standout player in Trent Williams. Now, Trent Williams is a future Hall of Famer, but the other four guys on this line, particularly on the right side of this line, are really, really question marks. And I think the pass rush for the Steelers can get after it, early and often in this one. And if the Steelers find success offensively, they could find themselves in a positive game state where their pass rush really becomes a differentiating factor in the second half of this game. And, you know, the questions and issues on the defensive side of the ball for the Steelers pretty clearly exist in the secondary. And I think, you know, the fact that Minkah Fitzpatrick is, you know, one of the best safeties in the league helps make up for some of the deficiencies at cornerback, although I have a higher grade on Patrick Peterson than it sounds like Judah does, but that's okay. The overall sentiment I get with the Steelers defense is that the strength of the front seven and the pass rush in particular could be the key factor here, particularly without George Kittle available. And it's weird to even have any kind of doubts in the Niners because, you know, as I kind of do like a synthesis of all of the players available in all the teams, the Niners have the best roster in the NFL. This is a team that I would be 0% surprised if they win the NFC, if they win the Super Bowl. Like, this is an extremely good team, well-coached team. But I think the rating that we will ultimately have for them come playoff time is going to be very different than what we're looking at heading into week one because of player availability and just because of, you know, the amount of reps and the amount of growth that I would expect that Purdy goes through in year two as, you know, he kind of comes off of what was a pretty significant surgery. So basically just counting on a little bit of rust. Not my favorite play on the board for the week, but I do think Steelers on the money line is the right side on this one.
Okay, now normally for the podcast, I will pick a selection out of the three guys. I'm not genuinely going to sit in the fence here because there's three really good cases there. We've got Steelers money line, Steelers money line, Steelers +2 for Sam, and Judah with 49ers -4.5. Which, if you were leaning that way, I would suggest doing that. So watch the Niners win by 3 or 4. That's usually how it works, and all three bets will be in the bin there. But that they're the three selections for the guys. Insights.matchbook.com, and we'll have a full recap from Thursday onwards. All the guys' selections here, so do check that out, particularly around Sunday if you're trying to recap some of the bets ahead of Red Zone. So we'll go to the second game here, the Dolphins at the Chargers. This is going to be live on Sky, 9:25 for those not watching Red Zone. It's Dolphins 2.4 currently on Matchbook. Chargers heavy favorites here, 1.66. The point spread sees the Dolphins get a 3-point head start at 1.93, and the total for this one is 51. Judah, you don't actually have a selection in this game, but talk to us a little bit about your thought process here and potentially for those live betting on the Matchbook Betting Exchange, there perhaps could be some angles there to take advantage of.
Yeah, I don't really have a good read pregame. Number one, I don't think we really have such a great idea of what the Chargers offense is going to look like. There's been plenty of talk about, Kellen Moore and Justin Herbert are going to finally unleash it. I'm not exactly sure I buy that. I think a lot of kind of Herbert's checkdowns are a function of him as a processor, and he checks it down a lot, and not a lot of that is Joe Lombardi. But I do also, I'm sympathetic to the argument that Kellen Moore can kind of unlock a new level of Herbert. I just want to kind of see it. On the Dolphins side of the ball, I really don't know if they really had trouble with the Chargers in that Sunday night game. I just could not throw a two. I think it was like 3 for 14 in the first half or something like that. The Chargers are very vulnerable against the run. I wouldn't be shocked if they attack via the run, but that's also was not the bread and butter of the Dolphins last year, who loved kind of getting the ball quickly to Hill and Waddle and doing that downfield. At the end of the day, there's a lot of kind of question marks of how this game plays out. I see it going a million different ways that I'm not comfortable. I don't have enough confidence in how I see the game playing out to bet it before the game. But live, I think something that you can really take advantage of is because both of these, and we see this with the high total, are terrific offenses. We could definitely see a lot of kind of volatility of a team going up 7, down 7, up 7, up 3, whatever it is. And you can kind of try and grab both sides, assuming that each team has a capable enough offense to kind of strike back. And certainly with the Dolphins offense and with Justin Herbert at quarterback, that seems like a pretty viable path in this one.
Okay, perhaps checking the in-play odds during the Matchbook Betting Exchange. If a team goes down 7, you may be getting a little bit of value there. Pre-game, Sam, what do you like here? And you kind of reference it, that it's quite a high total here. Yeah,
so I think in terms of picking a side, I would lean on the Chargers on the spread. But like Judah said, there are still unknowns here, and I do feel a little bit dirty in doing so. So I'd say that's more of a lean than an out-and-out bet. But for me, I would attack that points total. It's the highest points total of all the games on Sunday, 50.5. And I think it's stayed consistent since opening. I think it opened at 50.5 as well. And I'm always quite hesitant about taking the highest points total games, taking them on. But when I look at this, there's just so much talent on the field that I think there's a good chance. I think ultimately, like Judah mentioned as well, if Miami do decide to use the ground as the way to beat the Chargers, then they could have some real success there. I think last year in the regular season, they were like, I think maybe 5 teams worse in terms of passing yards per game than the Dolphins. So through the air is going to be how we're going to see the Chargers win if they do win. But there's ultimately going to be points on the board here. I'm sure of it. But look, I totally understand the idea of being a bit cautious with this one. And I would probably, I'd probably take that on board as well. But for me, I think this is going to be a high scoring game. 50.5 is a fairly high total, but can we see a lot of touchdowns? I really can. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. So for me, I'm just taking the over straight off.
Okay, lean towards the over 50.5 currently on Matchbook. 51 actually rolled into 51.1.96. Drew, for you, where are you at the moment with the Dolphins? Tua, look, he has that injury record. I think there was a few rumors that perhaps he was considering stepping away from the game altogether. Where are you so far with the Dolphins? And is this a good matchup for them with that +3 there, that crucial number, obviously?
Yeah, this one's interesting. I was kind of cool on taking a position on this game one way or the other. I like Judah's points about looking for in-play opportunities because both of these teams, I think, are rostered well to come back. But ultimately, I ended up taking the points with the Dolphins here because it got to a flat 3. And I think that there is a bit of market coolness on the Dolphins broadly, which is correct because from a season-long standpoint, this is now a super fragile team. One injury to the offensive line, which will come to Teron Armstead, presumably. One injury to Tua, one injury to any of the, current secondary, which is already down Jalen Ramsey. And all of a sudden, this is now nowhere close to the same quality of roster that you have otherwise in the AFC. And so you can see pretty clearly if this game was Chargers -3 in the middle of the season after, the Dolphins had absorbed, a couple more injuries, then, maybe that makes sense. But cooling on the Dolphins now when their injuries happened so early in camp, and I think that the Teron Armstead one was a bit over-reported, over-emphasized, to me at least, does not spook me off of this particular game. I think the fact that this is the first game of the season and we're coming off of a game last year that was so lopsided, as Judah mentioned, kind of matters to the degree that the Niners figured out, hey, this is how you stop this dynamic passing duo. Just get physical with them. And then the Chargers had the personnel and the vision to say, oh, yeah, we can do that even better than you can. And that really completely disrupted any kind of chemistry that Tua had going on with, particularly with Tyreek Hill, but with both Hill and Waddle, I thought, in that game. That now, those are facts. That exists on tape. That the Dolphins all know very well what did not work against the Chargers last time they played. And I think coming in with a little bit of whatever scheme McDaniel has cooked up over the offseason to catch the Chargers by surprise, I'm excited to see it. I think it will work. The Chargers defense, to me, their weakness is the secondary, at least on paper. We know fairly well that the Chargers have issues stopping the run. And I like the Dolphins' ability to particularly scheme up runs that outside the tackles against the Chargers that for whatever reason just have never solved the run fit problem under Brandon Staley. So I have a slightly more confidence here that the Dolphins are going to be able to go score for score throughout the game and catch the Chargers by surprise with some of their scheme decision making. And for those reasons, I think that they're a fair play at +3. It's a pretty modal outcome for this game, honestly. Chargers +3, but my second most likely outcome is Dolphins by 3. So don't mind having a +3 at a flat price. The kind of one other key thing that I wanted to mention here is we don't really know what Fangio is going to bring to the table. He's been out of the game for a couple of years, and I'm excited to see, ultimately what he does to specifically stop Herbert and Kellen Moore. I am at this moment on the Kellen Moore is being a bit overrated side of the discussion because I just feel like we should have seen him do more with the weapons that they had in Dallas. And for whatever reason, it was a lot of Zeke Elliott. It was a lot of predictable stuff. It was a lot of scheming the wide receivers into opportunities where they weren't getting yards after the catch. And, so it's almost, I think, a little bit overcooked in how much of an impact he's going to have on this offense. And so I think, just in general, Kellen Moore versus Fangio in the blind, I have to tip the balance to Fangio. So that's kind of that was sort of the distinguishing factor that finally got me onto the Dolphins here. But again, not anywhere close to my highest confidence play this week, but I think Dolphins +3 in pocket is a fun one.
Yeah, Dolphins 192 now, or 193, sorry, +3 currently on Matchbook Betting Exchange. But again, we'll leave this for a podcast selection. There's plenty of bets coming up in the any other bets section. And we'll go to Sunday Night Football here for our third game. Cowboys at the Giants. Fascinating encounter here. We'll take a look at the betting currently on matchbook.com. You can back on the money line. Cowboys heavy favorites, 1.61. The Giants 2.52. The point spread sees the Giants get a 3-point head start at over even money 2.06. And the total for this is 46. And over to you, Sam, on that total. You're leaning towards the over here.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards the over. I think this is a really tough game to call, to be honest with you. I look at this, that line is probably exactly where it should be in terms of the spread. I mean, I think the Cowboys will win, but do I want to take on those points? No, not really. I think it's too close. So for me, a 46-point total. I think we know there's enough quality on the Cowboys side. Obviously, Tony Pollard's going to be RB1 now. CD Lamb, we know all about him. But the Giants, in theory, they've got a lot better than they have last year. There's been some new incomings. I think they really overachieved last year in comparison to how good their roster actually was. But now I think he's everybody's sort of tight end sleeper kind of thing. But Darren Waller, he is going to do well. Let's be honest. He's going to have a huge target share there. And I think he could cause the Cowboys some problems. So yeah, for me, I think this game's going to be a 27-24 Cowboys probably, but like I'm not going near the result. I'm just going to take the over, which is the line's at 46 at the moment.
Okay, over 46, 1.94. I know Judah drew. It's a fascinating handicap, but pass at the current prices. Anything very briefly to add, because I do want to get to any other bets eventually.
Yeah, well, I'm glad Sam brought up Waller, because that's ultimately what kept me off the Cowboys in this game, and that's ultimately what kept me off the under. The Cowboys look like a tight end funnel on paper. I don't know how else you would attack this defense. And we didn't say, I thought Dan Quinn did a great job of scheming up his defense to stop Dable's, particular, concepts last year in both contests. So, and he's got the personnel to do it this year outside of the off-ball linebackers. So, that's sort of the distinguishing part of the game that I'm going to be watching pretty closely. Otherwise, this looks like a really nice matchup for the Cowboys offensively. I like I like just generally the idea of, if you have a strong enough offensive line to handle the front four for the Giants, then you can really put Wink Martindale defenses in a tight spot. He doesn't have the secondary, I don't think, to really kind of leave his corners on an island against the likes of CD Lamb in particular, but Brandon Cooks as well. I think CD Lamb is probably he ought to be favorite in sort of the top receiver market for week one. I would think he should be, at least. This is a really nice matchup for him. And so in the same sentence that I was a little cool on the Kellen Moore era in Dallas, I think people have oversold the impact that McCarthy's going to have into the negative for this Dallas offense. Yeah, they might be as good. They might be better. I think that part of the distribution hasn't really been, carefully thought through. So, for me, I lean Dallas, but the market is funny because they're going to write a lot of Dallas -3 at -122. They're going to write a lot of Giants +3.5 at -125. Like this is one of those where, the side is about right, but it's going to drive a ton of action both ways at super juicy prices. So this is the bookmaker's delight of the week.
It hooks you in, especially the Sunday Night Football when everyone's not got off to a good start. And Judah, same with you as Drew in terms it is a fascinating handicap. The three of you guys agree on that. Yeah.
I mean, maybe a slight lean towards Dallas. I think the matchup really sets up well for them, kind of as Drew said. Especially if the offensive line's picking up the blitz. Wink Martindale, the Giants defensive coordinator, loves the blitz. Did it at the highest rate in the NFL last season. That's an area in which Dak has been particularly good, and especially if they're picking up blitzes and you've got one-on-one coverage with CD Lamb, I mean that's not a matchup that favors the Giants at all. I do think that the spread is mostly right. I think ultimately the game probably comes down to how well Daniel Jones can avoid pressure. If he's getting off scrambles for positive yardage as opposed to being sacked, I think the Giants have a shot here. But I definitely lean Cowboys just by virtue of the matchup. And I think As Drew said, a lot of kind of overselling of McCarthy. They talk a lot about wanting to run the ball, but that seems like a stated preference. The revealed preference seems to be that they're going to pass. They signed Brandon Cooks. They let Ezekiel Elliott walk. Again, it's uncertain how they're actually going to attack. It's just a lean on the Cowboys, but I do think they have the slight edge if I had to choose one.
Yeah, the Cowboys -3 is 188, so it is trending towards that 3.5, which again, but look, they're only leans from the guys as well. So we'll move on from Sunday Night Football. No official bet there. Monday Night Football, there is one strong opinion for this game, so we'll get to it. We'll take a look at Bills at Jets. Probably the game of the weekend. Bills 1.74, Jets 2.28. The handicap sees the Jets get a 2.5 head start, and the total for this is 46. Drew, I'll hand over straight back to you. You have your probably favorite total of the week.
Yeah, I think this one's the biggest misprice. For full disclosure, I got in at 47. I think 46.5 was a fair play. It's down to 46 flat. That's still a fair play. My fair total on this one is on the other side of 44. I like alt unders in this one. And I like just in general the Bills to be able to really just put a lid on the Jets offense. I have just independent rankings. I think you can pretty sincerely put defensive.
Carry on there, Drew. I think we've just lost Drew's sound there for a second. If you want to jump out and back in, Drew, on that one. Judah, we might hand over to you. It's you're steering clear for this one in general, but have you any strong leans on the total at all?
I would lean towards the under, I think. I would also note that Aaron Rodgers and the Packers have played at by far the slowest pace in the league. They run very, very few plays, trying to extend drives, which I think kind of pushes games towards the under. I would imagine they also have just a little bit of trouble. The Jets defense, the best in the NFL last year. Again, yes, defenses do regress, but a team with the depth that the Jets have, I think, makes it a little less likely. But I don't love the taking the under. While I do think it's the right side, I'm not actually betting it because with Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers, I think in a particular game script, this can fly over. And no defense really matters, and all that's thrown out the window when elite quarterbacks are making big throws. So I would say the under is probably a lean, but I certainly see the case for the over, which means I'm going to hold off.
And for you, Sam, very quickly, I guess, look, it's the Rodgers. It's probably the box office week one game.
Yeah, and I think, like we mentioned with a few other teams, there's an element of the unknown, and I don't really know what an Aaron Rodgers Jets is going to look like. There's been so much conjecture, so much projection, but I think this is one I just want to sit back and I watch how this Rodgers led Jets go. I think the under that Drew suggested, I think that's probably the smart play here, because it's probably more likely that things won't go the way a lot of people would expect. But still, I just think this is a watching brief for me. I need to see what this team is about in 2023. And for the Bills, I mean, I think we know what we're going to get with them. But yeah, for the Jets, I just have to sit back and watch.
Yeah, over to you, Drew. There, carry on.
Yeah, apologies. Just as summary point, 2 top 5 defenses. I think each defense matches up especially well to stop the other offense. And I think the Jets' offense is a bet against until they prove otherwise. I get it. Aaron Rodgers is an upgrade over Zach Wilson. But I think Nathaniel Hackett's, being in charge of the play calling, the personnel groupings, the getting people in position on field on time is still something that he needs to prove that he can do effectively at the NFL level. And so, for me at least, this is kind of the ideal matchup for a first team to 20 wins.
Okay, yeah, under 46.0, 1.98. We will lock that in as a podcast best bet, but we will have loads coming up in the any other week one bets for those waiting along for red zone selection. So look, guys, we've got about just over 10 minutes to run through 1,001 bets. It's great to have so many opinions week one. We talked about this at the top of the show, that everyone is correct heading into Sunday. Judah, we'll start with you. You've 2 selections, starting with the Saints.
Yeah, I've got the Saints here. I think that this matchup sets up perfectly for them against the Titans, which is a team. They're a pass funnel. They had the best run defense in the league last year, and their cornerbacks really struggle. I think the Saints there's some questions on the long-term outlook of the team. just because they're an old roster. There's a lot of fragility. They're relying on guys like Michael Thomas, who has not been healthy for multiple years, but none of that's true in week one. And what I see is a quarterback in Derek Carr, who's kind of a product of his environment. And he, I think, has three terrific receivers. I mean, Chris Olave is a burgeoning superstar. Michael Thomas, when healthy, has been great, and he seems to be healthy right now. And Rashid Shaheed, who an undrafted free agent kind of emerged, is absolutely popping in most numbers. He was in the top in separation, the top after the catch, at the top deep. And this is a matchup which I think sets up for the Saints to pass almost at will against the Titans. And I'm not sure the Titans can respond on offense, especially in a negative game script, especially if Treylon Burks is banged up. I'm not sure he's going to play. If he does play, I'm sure he'll be limited. They really lack weapons. I'm buying the Saints here.
Okay, Saints +3, currently over even money 2.04. Your second any other bet is the Jags, Drew's Jags for this year, but you're happy to lay the points here, -5.5. Yeah,
I mean, I think that we might be talking about Trevor Lawrence as the MVP of the league this year, and then he by the second half of last year was a top 5 quarterback. They added Calvin Ridley by all accounts. You can flip the Calvin Ridley's absence as like, oh, he's rusty, or you can say his legs are just really fresh. This is a guy who hasn't played in a while. In some ways, he doesn't have the wear and tear of playing in the league. I can see him jumping right back into the top 10 receiver that he was last year. And I think Lawrence is a guy who kind of elevates those around him. Right? No one was saying last year that Zay Jones was going to be a productive receiver. Evan Ingram was a failure with the Giants, and Christian Kirk was like, oh my God, they way overpaid for a guy like Kirk. And fast forward a year and we're like, oh, these guys are legit, NFL players. And I think that's credit to Lawrence, who I see is continuing on this trajectory upward. And that leaves a major mispricing, especially Anthony Richardson might be a great prospect, and he might, have a brilliant NFL career. Week 1 of the season is not the time I want to be betting on him. I think defenses know that they can kind of just key in on the run. He's not a guy who I think is going to be able to stand in and deliver accurate passes. This has been talked about ad nauseum, but this is a guy who was 133rd out of 200 quarterbacks in accuracy last year. That's not going to cut it against NFL defenses. I see him just absolutely loading the box and, daring them to have Alec Pierce beat them one-on-one. That's not something I'd be comfortable betting. If the Colts, if we're relying on the Colts with Anthony Richardson delivering it to Alec Pierce, that's not a recipe for success. I think it's just a major tier gap, especially early in the season between the Jaguars and the Colts.
Okay, so the line currently for that is 4.5. Take the alternative handicaps, as Judah alluded to there. Jags -5.5. Over even money, you're getting on that 2.02 at the Colts. So Drew, listen, rattle through your 3 any other bet selection. I can't remember you having 3 in the any other bet section. So you are a confident week 1 player.
What's funny is these are not high confidence plays. In years past, I've been like, this is terrible price. We gotta buy and a sell going head to head in week 1. No, this year is I'm way more diffusely spread out. Like there's a lot of uncertainty. I get it. I like Judah's points though. I think the Saints look to me like the Las Vegas Raiders, Big Easy. This is a team now that I think is going to be an overbet regularly. I think the offense got significantly upgraded. I think the defense is significantly downgraded. And I think the pass rush for the Saints is especially a problem, which cannot, kind of take advantage of the 32nd best offensive line in football with Tennessee. So Tennessee's going to go score for score, in my opinion. I think both of these teams land in the 20s, and over 41.5 is actually second favorite total on the board for week 1. And actually the only over I've played. I think we're going to see a decent amount of unders through the first quarter of the season this year. Also liked Judah's point about the Colts being a team you should just take the alt spreads for or against all season. That's kind of one of the kind of more volatile on game by game teams, but really, really poor secondary going up against what I think is one of the better skill position groups in the NFL. So good looks there. I like the Houston Baltimore under 43.5. This is mostly a play on the fact that I think Houston's going to be relatively safe. I think they're going to be a relatively run first approach. And then I think in general, Roquan Smith matches up perfectly to stop what Houston's plan A, B, and C in this contest. And then on the other side of the ball, I think Houston's defense is coming in a little bit underrated this season. Decent chance they finish top half, maybe even borderline top 10 in terms of just overall production as a defense. And, with Baltimore not really using any of their starters and maybe not having Mark Andrews available, this to me looks like it's about 2 points too high. So I would have made this one about 41. So I like under 43.5 for Houston, Baltimore. And kind of a controversial one. And I don't have a super strong case here, but I like the Patriots getting +4 against the Philadelphia Eagles. Kind of mentioned off the top, I think the Eagles are a downgrade on defense this year, which opens the door for the Patriots to bring in whatever new concepts Bill O'Brien has cooked up for this crew to put a little bit of pressure on the Eagles. And I think the Eagles, if they find themselves in a negative game state in this contest, I'm fascinated to see what their comeback approach is against one of the better defenses in the NFL. Patriots defense on paper is absolutely scary. These guys are monsters. I think this is a really, really tough test for Hurts and company coming out of the gate. And I think there's a decent chance that New England shocks the world and wins week 1, which would set up for a nice buy low on the Eagles for week 2, but maybe I'm just dreaming.
3 picks for Drew. Again, they'll all be recapped on Matchbook Insights Thursday. Over to you, Sam. Couple of money line picks in your any other bet section.
Yep. So I kind of decided to take a look at some money lines I liked here, and there's 2 that kind of really leap out. First of all, Packers at Bears. I've spoken. I think they're going to be pretty good this year, the Packers, and this isn't going to be a romp by any means, but at 2.02, I'm happy with the Packers money line. I think they have what it takes, and ultimately good defense. I do think Jordan Love is going to be a player that we look at in 4, 5, 6 weeks and think, crikey, he's a lot better than potentially we expected him to be this season. So I think they're a team that have such a higher ceiling than we currently give them credit for. And while the Bears, I'm still so unsure on Justin Fields. I think this could be another case of great fancy player, not necessarily the guy you want under center in real life. So for me, I look at that offense, and admittedly they have DJ Moore now after having what was probably the worst receiving core in the history of football last year. I still look at them and I don't think I can really trust them with my money yet. Whereas the Packers, I think the coaching's good, defense is good. There's still a lot of talent there. So for me, I'm taking the Packers money line. And then for my other money line is Bengals, 1.8 in Cleveland. I don't understand this. I don't understand this price whatsoever. I think they should be far, far shorter favorites. And look, we know Joe Burrow is a doubt, but come on. He's not really a doubt, is he? This is all well, it's not a smokescreen. He did get injured, but he's not going to be in any. There's no doubt that we're going to see him play. We've seen him play with injuries before, and he was still very effective. So for me, I think they are a team that I'm happy to just put my money on here. We know what they can do. We know the talent they have receiving. We know the talent they have with Joe Mixon. Still a reasonable running back in this league. Whereas the Browns, for me, they are a real enigma. They might turn out to have a good season, but did Deshaun Watson really set the world alight after his hiatus, so to speak, last year? Not really. Do we think Kevin Stefanski's a great coach? Not really. I don't see reasons to be positive for them just yet, and I'm more than happy to potentially eat my words next Wednesday. But yeah, for me, the Bengals just at 1.8 looks like a sort of must play.
Okay, yeah, a couple of money line selections, the Packers and the Bengals. Fighting talk from Sam. As we go to best bets, this is where we will keep an official ROI, so there is absolutely no pressure whatsoever on the guys. And I'm loving this money line play nice and early at a big juicy price, Judah. So look, you take it away.
Yeah, I think this is my biggest mispricing of the week.
Okay.
I guess very quickly, I think the Raiders in 2021 were a playoff team who won 10 games and were fundamentally kind of a 7-win team. And last year were a, fundamentally 9-win team that won 7 games. I would say that if anything, the offense has gotten better. By my numbers, this was a top 10 team. I think the environment there was most critical to that, right? Josh McDaniels, regardless of whether or not Derek Carr is there, I think Jimmy Garoppolo steps in. They added Jacoby Myers, who I think is a top 30 receiver. They still have Devontae Adams. They finally have a Hunter Renfrow healthy. With McDaniels, I don't see the offensive output being that different. And conversely, the Broncos were my 32nd best offense last year. Yes, they added Sean Payton. They're currently implied for about 24.5 points, which was like 7 or 8 points above their average last year. And the things that, made Sean Payton such a terrific offensive mind with, Drew Brees with the quick game and the short passes is not an area in which Russell Wilson has excelled. He's also just been on the decline in every facet of his game. The defense was terrific last year. I don't expect that to continue. They lost their defensive coordinator, Elijah Evero, who was a terrific coordinator. A bunch of attrition in some key spots, including guys like Bradley Chubb. I just don't see this as a fair price at all. I think that Broncos and Raiders are about equally as good. I would much prefer to take the money line at some plus money here.
Okay, yeah, 272, big price for best bet Judah. So best of luck with that. Drew, over to you. The Seahawks against the Rams, and sorry, I was just trying to get the Rams Super Bowl price for those that have only tuned in after maybe taking a break from the NFL for a year, maybe 2 years. But they are currently 240 to win the Super Bowl, which I think just says it already where they've fallen since that victory.
Yeah, no, much more likely to be the number one pick in the NFL draft next year than winning the Super Bowl. Yeah, I don't understand why this is on the other side of 7. I don't think the Rams, as rostered, particularly on defense, are an NFL caliber team. This is one of the worst defenses on paper that I've ever tried to fairly price. I don't really know I don't really know how to go about what do you do if you have a Hall of Fame defensive tackle and then 10 other guys? What is a fair price for that defense is a very, very tough question. But my median projection for the Seattle offense here is getting to 30 points. I think that without Cooper Kupp, the Rams have a very, very tough ask to answer. I think the Rams going through some issues with personnel on the offensive line is a huge red flag. I think just in general, a young offensive line and in general, a bad offensive line in Seattle is a red flag. Not sure if you guys know this, but they have quite a lot of fan support in Seattle, tend to create noise, which has a tendency to impact offensive line communication. Really, everything is stacked here for Seattle. I think they win with margin. I think I think this could be an embarrassing game for the Rams. And I think that the Rams are a bet against until the market prices them closer to the Cardinals. Matt Stafford is a fine quarterback. People want to put him at or near the top 10 in terms of his ceiling as a player. That's fine with me. But behind this offensive line and with these weapons he's working with, I don't in any way, shape, or form see how they're going to be able to get it done against the Seattle defense that I think is a little bit underrated. This one should be on the other side of 7. I'll probably play small lines too.
Okay. Seahawks minus 5.5, 1.94 against the Rams, Super Bowl winners 2 years ago, believe it or not. Sam, over to you for best bet. Vikings against the Bucs, 5.5 currently the line.
Yeah, I'm taking the Vikings minus 5.5. I think it's been everybody's favorite sort of hobby this offseason is to beat on the Bucs, and there's been points where I actually think in certain areas there's been value with them. So I'd say in fantasy, the ADP of someone like Mike Evans or Chris Godwin has gone so low that I'd say they're potentially a value pick. However, when it comes to week 1, when it comes to my hard-earned money, I don't want it anywhere near them. And how they got to 8 and 9 last year, admittedly in a terrible division, but the ghost of Tom Brady sort of carrying them to some wins there, just with his know-how, even though he'd sort of lost so much of his game. I just can't back them with Baker Mayfield under center. I need to see what it looks like to even consider that. And ultimately, the one thing that I would always say about the Vikings, and it's in many ways potentially one of their weaknesses, is we know exactly what that team is. We know exactly what Kirk Cousins is. They're consistently slightly above average. That is their thing. And look, they've lost some talent, but they still have the likes of Justin Jefferson. And I just can't see this being anything but like quite a strong victory for the Vikings. I potentially even look at taking an alternate line as well and go a bit higher, but I'm just going to play it safe and go for the 5.5 right now.
Okay, 5.5, 1.96 Vikings against the Bucs, and those alternative handicaps has been a theme throughout the podcast. Do check out the Matchbook Betting Exchange. Some very really well-priced alternative handicaps if you do want to check them out, and very well easily to use on the Matchbook Betting Exchange app. We're done. Hope you guys forgive us for going a little bit over the hour, but with Super Bowl picks and all the guys had a lot to get in and a record amount of bets week 1. We'll see how we are week 2, but we'll be here every Wednesday. If you are listening on the podcast, we will record live 4 p.m. UK time every Wednesday as best we can to get that out to you, content out to you nice and early. Do check out the Matchbook Betting Exchange YouTube channel for clips of the podcast and our Twitter page, but also insights.matchbook.com, or particularly around red zone time if you want a recap of all the bets put up here. My thanks to Judah, Sam, and Drew. We'll be back next Wednesday. Until then, enjoy week 1. Bye-bye.